Vicki and I are teaming up again to bring you this episode on how to stop arguing with your child. That would be a good outcome. As with most of our parenting topics, it's important to start with a really basic understanding of child psychology. The basic model that helps us to take a good position as a parent to start with has to do with the 3 stages of moral development.
Right.
Now, if you're not familiar with the 3 stages, please take a minute to review those. There's a video here on the Positive Parenting playlist called Teaching Children Responsibility. And that's where we go over these 3 stages. And some of the other videos highlight it too. Also, if you're already a member of the Parenting Power Up, you've got all the resources right there that you need, including all the downloadable graphs and worksheets and things like that. So, review the 3 stages. Here's just a quick overview so that it'll make sense what we're talking about today. Stage 1, selfish, self-centered, immature, fighting and arguing, not willing to cooperate. Tantrums.
Motivated only by consequences.
Right, external
consequences.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's stage 1. And that's typical of little toddlers.
Yeah.
But it's also typical of a lot of teenagers, I know.
Yeah.
So it's about stage, not age. Now, when we move to stage 2, we stop fighting and start
cooperating.
Yes.
Right.
That is the hallmark of stage 2, actually. When a child is willing to cooperate with you, they're on stage 2.
And you have to remember, cooperate at any level, even if they're grumpy about it or ornery
Right.
about it or stomping about it. But if they are cooperating, you're in stage 2.
Right. That's extremely important because that changes the way we use consequences. But it also has relevance today for the arguing question. Now let's go to stage 3.
So stage 3 is all about responsibility. It's
Right.
when they're doing things for the right reason, the right thing for the right reason.
Yes.
And taking initiative.
Whole different level of responsibility.
Right.
This is where they see what needs to be done and they do it. You don't
Right.
have to nag them or even ask them.
Now, just really quick, I know that you can go back and review the stages and all of that, but just remember that when in one stage, you don't stay there forever. There's a lot of flitting in and out. And sometimes during an interaction with the child, they will flit in and out of stage 1 and 2 or 2 and 3.
Right. Or in different circumstances or settings. So they might be stage 3 at school, stage 1 at home.
Yeah.
Although it's very uncommon for a child to be at stage 3 consistently and slip into stage 1 very much.
Right.
Because that really is a higher level of moral development. So we're dealing more with 2 and 3. Well, what about arguing? Stage 1.
Yep, lots of arguing.
Right? Stage 1 is characterized by arguing and fighting.
Arguing on the part of the child. It doesn't have to be on the part of the parent. And that's what we're here to talk to you about, because you can only control your part of the equation.
If you're a parent and you're getting into the argument, then you're on stage 1.
Yeah.
So I know that's going to sting a little bit, but just swallow hard and see if you can own that. So, remembering the 3 stages, now let's talk about arguing for a minute. Why would a child argue with you?
Because they don't like the limits that have been set or placed on them. They didn't like it.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not that they're trying to get into a debate with you. They're not even interested in that. What they want is for that limit that you just set to be lifted from their little shoulders.
Yep.
So that's why they're arguing. Okay, why would a parent argue? Now, this is where you get to do a little bit of soul searching, okay? First of all, notice that you've just been drawn into an argument by a child.
Right.
Does that zing you a little bit? I hope it does. The reason parents argue is because they forgot about the 2 rules of plumbing. Now you're wondering where I'm going with that, aren't you? Yeah, let me explain. The 2 rules of plumbing. Do you remember when I was doing that little home renovation project?
Right.
And I called my dad, because I'm not a plumber, I'm a psychologist. And I called Dad and I said, what do I need to know about plumbing? And he said, Paul, there's only 2 things you need to know about plumbing. Rule number 1, water runs downhill. That's pretty important when you're plumbing. Rule number 2, don't lick your fingers. Which is just ridiculous, but it's important if you're installing a toilet. Just pay attention to that rule. And I've thought...
So how does that apply to parenting?
There is a clear analogy. I will clear this up for you.
Okay.
Water runs downhill. The rule for parenting is some things you control, other things you don't. This is a natural law. Get used to it. Some things you control, other things you don't. Are we clear about that?
Right.
What are you arguing with your child about?
It's almost always about something you don't control, like whether they
Whether
follow through, whether they have a good attitude while following through.
Or if they'll cooperate
right,
with you.
Right.
If they'll do their homework, their chores, whatever. They control that.
Yeah, I think sometimes we argue because we want them to be on a stage they're not.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Well, what stage do you want your kids to be on?
Life is much easier for everybody if everybody's on stage 3 at all times.
Oh, yeah.
But when your child is not on the stage you want them to be, suddenly you're arguing with them because they're not behaving the way you want them to behave. But they're behaving exactly in sync with the stage at which they are.
Currently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Doesn't mean they have to stay there.
No.
But mom, dad, who controls what stage your kid is on? Your kid.
Yeah. And what you control is the way that you interact with them and help to administer or guide the consequences. And if you don't understand which stage your child is on, then you will probably put forth the wrong consequence, which will cause frustration for both of you. And that's another place the arguing comes about.
The argument indicates that you're trying to interact with someone who's on stage 1. Mm-hmm. And they invited you to join them on stage 1 and you bought it. You accepted the invitation and here you are arguing with a child.
Right.
So, rule 2. Remember the 2 rules of plumbing?
Mm-hmm.
Don't lick your fingers.
Yeah.
The parenting equivalent? Pay attention to what you control. Because if you control it, what need is there for an argument? Let's say that you decide to set a limit on something that you provide as a privilege or whatever. Mm-hmm. Well, what if your child doesn't agree with that? Which they won't, by the way.
Yeah.
What if they don't agree with that? Well, that's okay. They don't have to agree. Mm-hmm. Do you see how there's no argument now?
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember what you do control. If you don't control it, then don't set it up because that's going to frustrate you. Don't set that as the limit if you can't control it.
I already mentioned plumbing. Should we go to Western movies now?
What?
She's never sure what I'm going to bring up on this. I remember an old Western movie where the character said, "Never draw your gun unless you intend to shoot, and never shoot unless you intend to kill." Now, please don't go quoting that as, "Oh, I learned this from Dr. Paul." No, it's just the philosophy, like what you were saying, Vicki. You don't put something out there as a consequence unless you fully intend to enforce it and you have the ability to control it. That's where it...
I think sometimes as parents, we're kind of in a hurry. We want to jump in with the consequence, with the whole story. You've got to do this, and if you don't, this is what's going to happen. And we kind of jump in. It's okay to sometimes buy yourself a little time. That really diffuses arguments too, is buying yourself a little time. Buying time for the child as well as for you. And say, you know what, I'm going to come back to this in just a minute after I've wrapped my head around the part I control, the part I don't control, what stage you're at, what stage I'm at, what I'm feeling, and then come back at it. So I think that another trick is just kind of using time to your advantage.
One nice little tool that supports what you're saying, Vicki. Ask, are you willing to cooperate with me? Mm-hmm. Instead of getting into the argument, I just need to know, will you cooperate with me? Mm-hmm. Because that determines if they're on stage 1 or stage 2.
Right. And that invites the child to think and not fight.
Beautiful. Think, not fight. Aside from my goofiness, which she has to put up with all the time, hopefully you found that useful and helpful. We have teamed up to put together the Parenting Power Up, and we invite you to visit the site parentingpowerup.com. There's a link right over there, and there's one down in the description. In this course, we've given you the tools that you need to be a confident parent who doesn't have to argue with your children, and that's going to be pretty awesome.